that he might resurrect himself and become an evangelist, a religious evangelist. The thinking was, well, you've played this crazy preacher and now you've been caught with dope, and so maybe you can, be the reformed character, and I can make a lot of money of sending you out on the road as an evangelist. And my father said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, see what happens and hope I'll keep working, which he did.
Brother, how long have you been on the wagon?
A year.
Where you been, in jail?
This was the advent of the bad boy star, the advent of people like Marlon Brando, the advent of James Dean, the advent of main characters, young men, let's say, usually young men, who in fact allowed a touch of darkness, a touch of negativity, a touch of illegality, let's say, not only in their screen images, but also in their off-screen images. There is a kind of politics in American life, it's often called libertarian, but it's basically an individualist politics. It was almost verging on anarchy, let's say. I just do what I'm going to do. And somehow that kind of figure, I think, became an attractive figure as a character in many films of that post-war period. Opting out. Okay, there is a Cold War in which the United States and Russia, a plague on both their houses. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do.
The night was young, and so were we, beneath the old.
Well, my parents stayed married. They met when they were 14 and 16, and they were married their whole lives. And yes, they had their ups and downs, and he had his affairs. But he always came back to my mother, and he was incredibly dependent on her emotionally. And in fact, when he would go on location, she would come along and they would rent a house, or at least a hotel suite with a kitchen, because he didn't like to go out to restaurants. He wanted her to cook, or they would cook together. And he liked being a homebody. He wasn't a Hollywood guy. I didn't lead the fabulous, glamorous Hollywood life growing up, because he didn't want that for himself and he didn't want that for his family.
So we had a very normal family life. Mom and Dad didn't bring Hollywood into the house, and what they really liked to do is just stay home at night, and we'd sit around and look at game shows on TV. We loved Password, and we'd sit in the living room and answer questions, give the clues and all laugh about it, and we'd play another word game at dinner. It was just a perfectly normal family life. And when we were all asked to go on and play Password on the TV set, it was really fun, because it was just like being at home.
Here's the first word.
Top, bottom, south, north. Daughter, brother. Daughter, sister. Opposite, daughter, brother. Daughter, son.
Yeah.
You have to understand, Dad married Mom with 2 boys already. And all of a sudden, we came along, the princesses. How my brothers even liked us, I don't know. But it was always Ron and me and Kelly and Mike, always. In Africa, sitting in photographs, everything. Mike and Ron were sent off, to military school. And Ron, he wanted to be a hero, so he joined the Marines. And he wrote a letter from my brother, who was a conscientious objector and would have gone to Canada because his number came up. And he wrote a letter saying, this man cannot shoot a gun.
The type of war that flares up in today's world of tensions can mean sending American troops thousands of miles overseas, far from their sources of supply. These conflicts, as in Vietnam, can involve large numbers of men who must be able to move quickly against aggression.
It was a terrible time in our family. This Vietnam War, literally, it was a horrible time in our family, with one brother going conscientious objector and the other brother joining the Marines. It was a rift.
My fellow Americans, not long ago I received a letter from a woman in the Midwest. She wrote, "Dear Mr. President, in my humble way, I am writing to you about the crisis in Vietnam. I have a son who is now in Vietnam. My husband served in World War II. Our country was at war. But now, this time, it's just something that I don't understand. Why?"
Americans haven't been fighting their wars in America, not since the American Civil War and then the War of Independence, right? That's a long time. At the very beginning, America did not want to be involved in international affairs, and World War I was the beginning of where, reluctantly, America had to enter into the conflict because the consequences of not entering would have been too serious, both for America and for the rest of the world. They had to. And since then, they have found themselves in the position of the rest of the world turning to America and saying, "Hey, why aren't you doing something about this?"
That action in Vietnam had been going on for so long before it really became what Americans saw as a war. I mean, we had been in Vietnam for a long time before then, so it kind of, I think in a way, sort of crept up on America. And my impression was that Dad believed that we were fighting communism, and it was important to do that. And so I don't really think he questioned our role in the war. And I don't think he ever came to believe that it was one of the worst mistakes America ever made, which in general is the feeling now.
My father went to Vietnam. He was asked to go to Vietnam by the State Department as a civilian, as to boost the morale of the troops, to go around and talk to the troops, because he was such a respected figure and such an American respected icon. And he did do that. And before he went, I think he was a little more in favor of that war. And when he came back, he was certainly in favor of our fighting troops on the ground and thought the world of them. And he saw the sacrifices that were being made on all sides and the brutality. And, you know, it really devastated him to see that, so.
People must understand that there is no issue. They waste more time and more newspapers and more discussion and more press about staying in or pulling out. You have no option. You can't pull out. There's no way. You can't pull out. You can't pull out of the human race. It's impossible. Believe me, you can't pull out. Anybody who's been over there, they'll tell you you have no choice. You can't get out.
Both my parents went on did a tour of, not a tour of duty, they weren't entertaining the troops, but they did have celebrities go over to sort of boost morale, and they would stand up and give a little talk and go around and meet injured soldiers in the hospitals. And that was the last time they saw my brother. I think Ronnie was killed not long after that, not long after they were there.
Mom and Dad did, though. They saw Ron, and it was all that they flew in Vietnam when it was, really in war still. And it was, I just never have forgiven myself for not going and seeing Ron one last time. My father was so proud of him. He never recovered from it. The only thing Dad ever said to me about Ron's death was, "I'm so very, very sorry." And then he went up to his bedroom, and I never talked to him after that. He went on acting, but he never recovered.
Vietnam footage was the first that showed people actually suffering and bleeding and getting killed. I think he thought news coverage had gotten really far away from what it should be. I thought it was very interesting that Dad never made a war film that glorified war. He was very loath to do that. And he didn't want the glory to come to him when the men he flew with, and some of whom died, weren't getting the recognition. He never wanted to outshine those men. And I think that's why he didn't want to glorify war. And he didn't talk about it very much.
Can we create a moral society with this violent past? I mean, which is a kind of American situation too. What's the sin? What's the stain in American society? I mean, one definition of it is this whole sense of violence.
There isn't enough variety in today's movies. Today, there seems to be a same. It's almost like seeing sequels to the same type. The use of violence, not as a part of the story, but just the use of violence for the sake of use of violence.
We shall see you on the movie again?
Oh, sure. I hope so.
You have some projects now?
Yes, a couple in the works. No, I hope to. I hope to keep going.
Without violence?
With violence where it's important to have it to tell the story. Otherwise, we'll let the other people do that.
One looks at all the films you've done. I mean, you've resisted on over 130 films. Is it in your eyes a matter of talent or persistence?
Survival.
What is in your eyes? What would be for you the art of living? What does enjoy doing that symbolize the art of life?
Avoidance of death, principally.
Is in a way making films another way for you of avoiding death?
It's a way of avoiding work.
Is it important for you a good sense of humor?
It's salvation.
Goodbye now, goodbye now. I thought the party was divine. I